Chapter 15. In this chapter, we just focus on teachers as professionals, that is, as members of an occupational group. We will see how this rather abstract concept of professionalism affects the daily life of classroom teachers. In effect, we examine the role of individual teachers within the larger context of being members of a profession. The essence of a career in teaching is close hands-on work with the young. When people think about becoming teachers, their thoughts and musings usually revolve around working with students. Rarely do they bother with hypothetical issues beyond the scope of the classroom. This narrow focus is both natural and appropriate because a teacher's success or failure depends on his or her effectiveness with students. Nevertheless, there is much more to being a teacher. Teachers work within a system that exposes them to pressures from many quarters. Prospective teachers are often somewhat naive about these pressures and focuses, and that naivety can be dangerous both in making a career decision and in making a successful career. To help you see this point, we'd like you to indulge in a set of thought experiments for a few moments. We will offer you a brief scenarios, and after reading each one, you should reflect on how you might react. As you read each scenario, imagine yourself as the first-year teacher in that ideal classroom you carry around in your head. Assume that you appear to be doing a fine job. You are really enjoying your teaching experience. Your students are making nice progress, and they seem to be interested in their work. A few helicopter parents have indicated that although they were initially worried that their precious children were to have a new teacher, they are pleased with their children's progress in your class. So things are going very well until scenario 1. You get a special delivery letter from a group called Parents Action Party. You have heard that they are very active in your area and are especially interested in schools. Their letter informs you that their lawyer is preparing a case against you for using books on their disapproved list. They claim they have evidence that you are waging a subtle but nevertheless vicious war against the cause of justice and liberty, and have succeeded in temporarily deflecting the minds of some of your students from the truth. Furthermore, they want to know why you display the United Nations flag and why there are no pictures of past presidents on your classroom walls. Finally, you are said to have racial preferences that manifest themselves in your treatment of students. This is the first you have heard of these charges and even of the PAP's interest in you. You think of yourself as a loyal citizen and bias-free and are shocked by the letter. They have requested that you respond in writing by next week or they will begin legal proceedings. Scenario 2. In late January, the principal holds a conference with each new teacher, told you she thought you were doing a fine job and that she wanted you to return next year. In passing, she remarked that she would be getting a contract to you in the spring. Toward the end of April, you get a little nervous and called her office. She spoke to her executive secretary, who said not to worry, that you were on the list and that a contract would be coming before long. You stopped worrying. Today is the last day of school, and you find a very nice personal note from the principal in your school mailbox. She thanks you for your fine work during the year and says she is sorry you will not be back next year. You call the principal's office. She is in conference, and her executive secretary says they are not renewing your contract. She can't remember speaking to you in April. She knows nothing about the case. She does know, however, that the Board of Education has put a lot of pressure for cuts in next year's personnel budget. She ends by telling you, "You must be very disappointed, dear. I know how you must feel." Wrong. No, she has no clue. Scenario 3. One lunch hour, you noticed something peculiar when you sat down at the faculty dining table. Conversation stopped, and you had the distinct impression your colleagues had been talking about you. A few days later, an older teacher stopped you in the hall after school and said, "I don't want to butt in, but you really are upsetting Miss Hillary and Mr. Alexander. Miss H and Mr. A have the classroom on either side of yours. Apparently, they claim your class makes so much noise that they can't get anything done. Both are very traditional in their approach to education, whereas you believe in a more activity-oriented approach. Although your class is rather noisy occasionally, it is never chaotic, and its noise is usually a byproduct of students' involvement in a task. Twice, Mr. Alexander has sent messengers with notes asking that your class be quieter. You have always complied. You hardly know either teacher. You have never really talked to Mr. Alexander except to say hello. Mrs. Hillary, with whom you've chatted, prides herself on being a strict disciplinarian. What she means, you have inferred, is that she is able to keep the children quiet. You know Mr. Alexander is chummy with Miss Hillary. You go to the vice principal, who seems to know all about the case, but only from Hillary Alexander angle. Inexplicably, the vice principal gets quiet hostile and claims that until you came along, the faculty got along beautifully, and that furthermore, you were being very unprofessional and making complaints against experienced teachers. You feel as if you were trapped in a bad dream. These horror stories, of course, are not everyday occurrences. Also, keep in mind that entrance into any profession has its trials and booby traps. These accounts are intended to help you realize that you can be an effective teacher and still have trouble keeping your job. What is the common theme running through each of these anecdotes? You, the teacher, were succeeding in your work when children, but forces outside your classroom began to impinge on you. PAP wanted to make a target case of you. The school system bureaucracy was ready to put you on the unemployed rolls. 2 of your colleagues damaged your reputation with the faculty and administration. You are feeling abandoned and vulnerable. Although you may feel confident that you can handle some of these situations, it is doubtful that you could cope with all such cases that might arise. In some instances, you would be powerless to respond effectively to your adversaries, and you might end up a helpless victim of circumstance. Fortunately, a teacher is not alone. Like people in many other occupational groups, teachers have organizations whose job it is to protect them from such indignities and injustices. These organizations function on several levels, from the local to the national, and usually their very existence keeps situations like those described from occurring. When they do occur, these organizations are there to support the teachers. At least that is the way they should work. In becoming a teacher, you are not just committing yourself to work with children, you are joining an occupational group composed of other individuals with similar responsibilities, concerns, and pressures whose help you may need and whom in turn will need your help. The question is teaching a profession? Probably arouses deep yawns in many of our readers. Most people thinking about a career in teaching are more interested in whether it will be a personally rewarding way to spend their lifetime than in whether it is a true profession. Will teaching bring me professional satisfactions? Will it provide an outlet for my talents and energies? Will I be effective with kids? These questions are related issues, are important to teachers, and influence the quality of education teachers provide for children. They will also affect the quality of your life as a teacher. So what is a profession? A profession is more than a group of individuals all engaged in the same line of work. Professions have a more or less recognizable set of characteristics that distinguish them from non-professionals. As you read the following list of characteristics, check whether you think teaching qualifies on each premise. A profession renders a quite unique, definite, and essential service to society. Only the people in the particular profession render the service. For instance, only lawyers practice law. The service rendered must be considered so important that it is available to all the people in a society. A profession relies on intellectual skills in the performance of its service. This does not mean that physical actions and skills are not needed. Rather, the emphasis in carrying on the work is in intellectual skills and techniques. A profession entails a long period of specialized training. Because professionals' work requires special instructional skills, it requires specialized intellectual training. General education, such as that represented by a bachelor's degree, is valued but is not considered adequate. This specialized training must cover a substantial period and must be obtained in cram courses or correspondence schools. Both individual members of the profession and the professional group enjoy a considerable degree of autonomy and decision-making authority. Professional groups regulate their own activities rather than having outsiders set policies and enforce adherence to standards, whereas factory workers have very limited decision-making power and are closely supervised in the performance of their work. Professionals are expected to make the most of their own decisions and be free of close supervision by supervisors. A profession requires its members to accept personal responsibility for their actions and decisions and in general for their performance. Because a professional service is usually related to the client's human welfare, this responsibility is an especially serious one. A profession emphasizes the services rendered by its practitioners more than their financial rewards, although the personal motives of any individual professional are not necessarily any higher than any other's works. The professional group's public emphasis is on service. The Leaders in Education feature provides one example of the teacher field's emphasis on service. A profession is self-governing and responsible for policy in its own ranks. As a consequence, professional groups perform a number of activities aimed at keeping the quality of their services high and looking out for the social and economic well-being of the professional members. Also, these self-governing organizations set standards of admission and exclusion for their profession. A profession has a code of ethics that sets out the acceptable standards of conduct for its members. These characteristics, then, are the major requirements of a profession. Although few professionals satisfy all of them, the list does serve as a benchmark against which occupational groups can measure themselves and direct their development if they wish to enjoy professional status. With these criteria in mind, let's look at some of the arguments that people have made for and against teaching as a profession. The roots of teaching as an occupation go back to ancient Greece, where slaves called pedagogos or pedagogus taught children to read and write and helped them memorize passages of poetic history. Despite this long history, a careful look at current practices reveals that teaching does not qualify as a profession. If education is a teacher's unique function, a teacher certainly has a great deal of competition. Children today learn a tremendous amount from media offerings, including Sesame Street, the History Channel, YouTube.com, and Sports Illustrated. The non-teacher educators include parents, ministers, older friends, neighbors, employers, best friends, coaches, scout leaders, camp counselors, and grandparents. The world is bursting with teachers, and those who hold forth in school buildings have only a small piece of the action. Most professions, and certainly the skilled trades, have an extensive period of apprenticeship where individuals learn the tools of the trade in an up-close and personal way. Bob Moses is most famous as a lifelong social activist and civil rights pioneer, but he is also a visionary educator, born in 1935 in New York City and raised in a Harlem housing project. He attended public schools. Identified as an able student, he was admitted into one of the city's academic elite schools, Stuyvesant High School. From there, he received a full scholarship to Hamilton College, earning his BA in 1956. Next, Moses moved to Harvard University to study philosophy, and just 1 year later received his MA. Working toward his doctorate, he was forced to leave graduate school because of the death of his mother and the hospitalization of his father. He returned to New York City, taking up a position as a math teacher at the prestigious Horace Mann School. During this period of academic study and teaching, he gradually and then increasingly became involved in the nascent black protest movement. In the early 1960s, he became a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, one of the earliest and most action-oriented civil rights groups. His calm leadership style contributed to his fast rise within the organization. In 1964, he was made director of the Freedom Summer Project, which had its goal to end racial disfranchisement. The means to that goal was to recruit white college students to work with local blacks to educate and register voters in Mississippi. The state's 1890 Constitution included requirements for voter registration, such as poll taxes, residency requirements, and literacy tests, which made it nearly impossible for blacks to register and vote. Moses' larger goal was to develop self-reliant organizations and leaders who could continue to struggle after organizers had departed. Missing for 2 weeks, the bodies of 3 of his recruiters were discovered decomposing in a landfill. Hearing the news of their colleagues' murders, the rest of the group was frozen on the spot and in fear for their lives. Witnesses have told of how this quietly charismatic man called his recruiters together and said that, given their situation, it was completely understandable if they felt they should leave. And further, that no one in the movement, particularly him, would be critical of their returning home. No one moved. No one left. They all continued their work. Bob apparently was growing more and more at odds with the escalating tactics of SNCC, and he gradually withdrew from the movement. First, he went to Canada, and then in 1969, he and his wife went to Tanzania to teach mathematics. 6 years later, he returned to Harvard to further his study of philosophy. He also began teaching math at the local Cambridge High School. In 1982, Bob became one of the earliest recipients of the famed MacArthur Foundation Genius Awards. Around that time, his daughter was experiencing difficulties in math. Convinced that algebra was the gateway to mathematics, and that in turn mathematics was the key to academic success and upward mobility, he used substantial MacArthur Prize money to start working on that, on what has become the Algebra Project. Project Algebra is not built around a new breakthrough mathematical theory or an initiative or an innovative instructional technique. Rather, the project has used algebra as an organizing tool to raise the conscientiousness of students, parents, and educators regarding how mathematics is the key to quality education and further success. Instead of reinventing the wheel, Project Algebra uses the best educational research in the development of curriculum material and teacher training programs. Reminiscent of the Freedom Summer Project, a major part of the work of Project Algebra is recruiting, training, and deploying black and white high school and college students. These math literacy workers work with and teach their young peers not just in algebra, but a variety of math learning issues. Project Algebra has documented that the project's participating schools have substantial increased student enrollment in college preparatory mathematics classes and increased numbers of students going to higher education. With its algebra project, Bob Moses has brought together his two lifelong passions, education and individual civil rights. In recent years, this modest man has been the recipient of numerous civil rights and educational prizes and awards. He has many classrooms around the nation. Most recently, in 2012, he was teaching a course in the African American Studies program at Princeton University. His widely hailed project now serves 10,000 students in 28 cities and 11 states. Although teaching has intellectual and theoretical foundation, it nevertheless requires a rather short period of specialized training. Also, interest into the occupation is not especially competitive, particularly on intellectual grounds. If teaching is a profession, it is one composed of college graduates with a sweeping span of academic abilities, varying levels of commitment, and a wide range of motivations for becoming teachers. Although a good deal of talk touts teachers' autonomy and decision-making power, teachers in today's classroom still have a very low level of autonomy and decision-making power. Teachers at the school run from the bottom of the school hierarchy, which is ultimately commanded by the local Board of Education and increasingly by state and federal initiatives. Unlike lawyers and doctors who can reject clients, teachers have students assigned to them. They also have supervisors, their principal, lead teacher, department head, or others farther up the chain of command. They teach a curriculum and are responsible for their students meeting content standards that others have chosen or developed. Unlike in other professions, teachers do not formally evaluate other teachers. Instead, administrators do so. Moreover, most of the important decisions that affect teachers' daily lives, even those that bear directly on the standards of their own profession, are made by non-teachers. Although teachers are beginning to get more involved in teacher preparation programs and are acquiring some influence in the licensing and certification of teachers, laypeople and bureaucrats still wield a great deal of the decision-making power. Some teachers, like factory workers, even have to punch a time clock. In some, they have very little to say about what goes on in their shop. Although things are beginning to change, it is a rare event indeed when a teacher loses his or her job because Johnny cannot read or Samantha failed calculus. After a teacher achieves tenure, it takes some form of gross negligence, clear incompetence, or serious sexual offense for him or her to be fired. As professionals, teachers do very little policing of their own ranks. Their professional organizations are just like other self-serving organizations, whether composed of Teamsters or auto workers. That is, the primary energies of teachers' associations and unions and professional associations are devoted to their own survival and growth. Secondarily, their attempt to protect their members, increase their salaries, and expand their benefits. Most teachers, however, are only minimally involved in the major professional associations and their activities, except when the organization calls to strike, a rare but still somewhat contradictory activity for a profession supposedly dedicated to serving children. Teachers generally just pay their dues. Most teachers claim they are too busy to take an effective role in professional affairs. This lack of fully engaged involvement in professional activities may stem from the fact that so many teachers supplement their incomes with second jobs in the after-school labor market, and many too have child care and housemaking responsibilities that eat up their discretionary time. Roles and duties for teachers in the 19th century. Teachers will fill the lamps and clean the chimneys each day. Each teacher will bring a bucket of water and a scuttle of coal for the day's session. Make your pens carefully. You may whittle nibs the individual tastes of the pupils. Men teachers may take one evening each week for courting purposes, or 2 evenings a week if they go to church regularly. Women teachers who marry or engage in improper conduct will be dismissed. Every teacher should lay aside from each day's pay a godly sum of his earnings. He should use his savings during his retirement years so that he will not be a burden to society. Any teacher who smokes, uses liquor in any form, visits pool halls or public halls, or gets shaved at a barber shop will give good reasons for people to suspect his worth, intentions, and honesty. The teacher who performs his labor faithfully and without fault for 5 years will be given an increase of 25 cents per week in his pay. Teachers work in circumstances very different from those encountered by other professionals. Like other public servants, they are hired rather than operating as independent agents. They are on fixed salary schedules and are protected by tenure laws rather than independently having to find a market for their services. In effect, teaching is a low paying, relatively high security job rather than a high paying, low security profession. Seniority as a teacher appears to be more important than competence. Talk about professionalism may be personally satisfying to teachers, but it does not form to the reality of the teacher's occupational life. The evidence for the status of teaching as a profession is witnessed and attested to by the very nature and nobility of the teacher's work. Society has entrusted teachers with its most important responsibility, the education of its young. Throughout history, many great thinkers have acknowledged how crucial the work of the teacher is to the fulfillment of personal and national goals. As this realization has spread in recent decades, opportunities and rewards for teachers have continued to improve. Service to others lies at the very heart of what it means to be a professional. Teachers make large material sacrifices to serve children. The overwhelming percentages of people who teach could find work that, at least in material terms, is much more rewarding. Many could command large salaries in business or more lucrative professions. A 2010 study found that teachers surveyed said they spent that school year an average of $398 of their own money on school supplies and an additional $538 on instructional materials, a total of $936 for their classroom. This is truly service above and beyond their call of duty. Although children learn from many people, from parents to television personalities, teachers are the specialists who pass on to the young the key skills they need to participate effectively in the culture. They aid the young in acquiring the most difficult, if not most important, skills. Those that involve thinking and manipulating ideas. Neither reading nor geometry is often learned on the street. Teachers are the indispensable midwives of the knowledge society. Although teachers do not undergo a particularly lengthy period of specialized training, they are in a sense continually educating themselves. Further, teachers are expected to upgrade their teaching skills and content knowledge periodically. Teachers have an immense span of personal control. They normally determine the method of instruction. They decide which aspects of the curriculum they will highlight and which they will cover quickly. The limits on their creativity in the classroom are few, if any. After the initial few years of teaching, they are seldom observed and evaluated. Teachers' classrooms are their castles. If teachers believe they do not have enough autonomy or do not agree with their administrators, they are free to move to another school. A teacher's autonomy is accompanied by a responsibility to teach effectively. Like other professionals, teachers must be able to justify the manner in which they render their social services, whether through grading or disciplinary actions. Teachers take responsibility for their actions and, like other professionals, are open to criticism of their performance. Like most other complex questions are carry about whether teachers of profession cannot be answered satisfactorily with simple pro and con arguments such as those just offered. Also, the conditions under which teachers work differ so dramatically, and teachers possess such varying degrees of knowledge, commitment, and expertise that it is difficult to come up with a definite one-size-fits-all answer. In most schools, teachers fulfill many of the criteria of professionals. In other schools, they seem to function somewhat as clerks or technicians. In certain ways, teaching clearly is eligible for professional status. In other ways, it deviates sharply from accepted canons of professionalism. On the one hand, teachers provide an intellectual service to the community. They undergo specialized training to master the theoretical basis of their work. Ethical standards guide their work with students. On the other hand, they too often function like many other low-level white-collar workers and civil servants. Too often, seniority and job security are the rules that guide their path rather than excellence and independence. Like many other occupational groups that are considered professional at this moment in history, teachers only partially qualify for this sobriquet. For those reasons, some educators call teaching a semi-profession, a label we reject as pejorative and demeaning. Another way to look at the issue is to think of teaching as an evolving profession. That is, it is in the process of becoming a full profession. Today, great efforts are being made to increase the professionalism of teaching. What will determine whether teaching becomes a full-fledged profession during your lifetime? Among the key factors are the trends toward greater self-determination, better preparation, and recognizing excellence in teaching. Perhaps teachers do lack the autonomy of, say, small-town lawyers, yet every profession has limits to its autonomy. For example, an increasing number of doctors and dentists are now employed by health maintenance organizations and are forming unions to protect their rights against their HMO managers. And the crucial point for teachers, though, is the direction in which teaching is moving. In the same way that the United States is committed to civilian control of the military, Americans are committed to civilian control of their schools. Control over the teaching profession is a different matter, however, and should be largely in the hands of teachers. In particular, to make teaching a full profession, teachers must assume a large role in the governing of their career affairs. Up to now, the great majority of teachers have taken the attitude, let George do it, allowing others to make their majority decisions about who should teach, how teachers should be trained, and under what conditions they should render their services. This situation will not substantially change until teachers take the lead in making it change. To make teaching a full profession, teachers must also demand better preparation requirements. As long as the public believes that any college graduate with a smattering of education courses can walk in off the street and do a teacher's job, people will tend not to treat teachers as professionals. As described in Chapter 13, what are your job options in education? This dangerous perception may even worsen if, owing to teacher shortages, states issues alternative license to individuals without any professional training at all. We are definitely not suggesting that teachers should adopt artificial trappings like a doctor's smock or a general's braided uniform so that they will appear more distinctive and impressive. Rather, teachers must appear better because they are better. Like architects and surgeons, teachers must know their work, and their vocation must be imbued with a sense of high purpose. When that happens, the public will decide affirmatively that teachers should be treated as full professionals. Not all of the nearly 4 million people working in U.S. schools are interested in, and in some cases capable of measuring up to the standards of professionalism discussed earlier. At present, what we are calling the teaching profession is a mixed bag, with a great many transients just passing through, a great many rather uncommitted teachers, and a great many truly excellent dedicated career teachers. Almost 50 years ago, an educator captured what we believe to be the essence of the professional teacher in the following statement. Let us define a career teacher as one who plans to and actually does make a life occupation of teaching, one who is philosophically, emotionally, and spiritually committed, who is never satisfied with what he does and how well he's doing it, and who fully intends to keep on growing for the rest of his life. This educator estimated that only 1 out of 4 practicing teachers fits his definition. Herein lays the difficulty. Until the great majority of teachers satisfy this education definition, or until there is a qualitative regrouping of those presently identified as teachers, the designation of teaching as a full-fledged profession will be in doubt. What people think of the professional status of teaching is clear and important. Even so, the issue is dwarfed in importance by how you will live out your professional life and how you will be as a teacher. One way to think about this point is to conceive of teaching as having 3 levels, or 3 ways that teachers go about their work. Level 1 is the imitative maintenance teacher, level 2 is the meditative teacher, and level 3 is the generative creative teacher. Individuals functioning at level 1 are essentially going through the motions prescribed by someone else in a rather mechanical fashion. They tend to be preoccupied with classroom discipline and keeping students busy. Such teachers may be successful at getting students through their lessons and examinations, but they are somewhat robotic and narrowly following preset patterns, namely patterns set out in curriculum guides or textbooks. Level 1 teachers find security in teaching to the test and in what are predatorily called teacher-proof materials, rigid instructional materials that offer step-by-step guidance for teachers' actions. Many new teachers, before they get their sea legs, operate for a time at this level. Although not in itself a problem, the imitative maintenance approach doesn't allow teachers to respond to the unique needs of students or to the special circumstances that continually arise in the classroom. Level 1 teachers don't know how to respond to the interesting off-the-wall question or what to do when something unexpected happens. Instead, they say the teachable moment float by. This kind of unimaginative teaching makes teaching more of a technical occupation than a profession. As the label meditative implies, teachers at level 2 mentally reflect on what they are doing in the classroom, but their reflection lies within a narrow range. They have an awareness of the uniqueness of their classroom and their students, and they go beyond their curricular guides and materials, but their adaptations are few and seem more like tinkering around the instructional edge. They may, for example, deviate from the prescribed teaching guide, but not very far. Level 2 teachers may vary their instructional patterns to fit certain classroom events. That is, the obvious boredom of students, or they may bring in supplemental materials. However, they are hardly innovative. Oh, that scared me. A bird just hit my window. Okay, sorry. There is a large jump to the generative creative level. These teachers focus on their individual students and they take a wide view of knowledge. They attend to their curricular guides and the prescribed materials, but those materials serve as launching pads rather than being the sole targets of their instruction. These teachers' classrooms are characterized by a wide level of instructional approaches and problem-centered materials. Level 3 teachers play off the interests and talents of their students, but not in a casual and pandering way. Their expectations for students are high and transcended required tests and examinations. They approach instruction as diagnostics, seeking the best ways to engage students in their own mental growth. They do not simply transmit knowledge, but rather create. They create in students a desire to learn, and they create classroom environments where individual students become self-directed learners. A few new teachers bust on the educational scene as level 3 generative creative teachers. Many start at level 2 or attain this status quickly. As a beginning teacher, you will need to have an understanding of your current behavior and to work towards the highest level. This very embracing of the goal will put you on the road to full professionalism. This concept of levels of teaching, besides offering a path to excellence, points to a challenging professional opportunity, an opportunity to which we now turn. Since it began in 1989, the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards has been working to recognize and provide greater support to superior teachers. In the process, this organization attempts to strengthen the claim of professionalism for the career of teaching and to play a leading role in this effort. For over the years, the lack of recognizable high standards has discouraged some potentially outstanding people from entering teaching and has lowered the level of aspiration of others. High standards tend to focus people's attention and harness their energies. For example, in long-distance running, the 4-minute mile was long considered an unbreakable barrier. For many years, sports commentators pontificated that it was beyond the capacities of humans to run a mile in 4 minutes or less. Then in 1957, Roger Bannister, a relatively obscure British medical student, broke the magic barrier. A new standard was set and runners reset their sights. The following years, 37 runners broke that unbreakable barrier. Today, breaking the 4-minute barrier is commonplace, simply because a new standard has been set and people have risen to it in great numbers. The NBPTS is trying to perform a similar function for the teaching profession. The NBPTS has established standards for teaching practice and has developed a series of board certification assessments based on these standards. As of 2013, slightly more than 102,000 teachers from all 50 states and the District of Columbia have achieved a board certification. Board advocates believe that these standards allow teachers to gain a highly regarded professional credential like that available to physicians, accountants, architects, and other professionals. So far, however, although 90% of all U.S. physicians and 30% of U.S. architects are board certified, only 3% of U.S. teachers have achieved that feat. The NBPTS is dedicated to and directed by 5 core propositions. Teachers know the subjects they teach and how to teach these subjects to students. Teachers are committed to their students and their learning. Teachers are responsible for managing and monitoring student learning. Teachers think systematically about their practice and learn from experience. Teachers are members of a learning community. In addition, the organization has 5 distinguishing characteristics. The NBPTS supports experienced teachers, that is, teachers with a baccalaureate or an advanced degree who have graduated from an accredited college or university and have at least 3 years of teaching experience. Taking the boards is completely voluntary. It is not intended to be a condition of work like state license, but rather an achievement testifying to an individual teacher's attainment of a high level of professionalism. Taking the boards involves submitting oneself to a set of examinations and assessments in particular areas or subject matter such as early childhood, English language arts, and physical education and health. Currently, board certification is offered in 25 different teaching fields. The standards are updated every 7 to 10 years to stay current. The National Board convenes the experts and facilitates the process by which those experts write the standards that define accomplished practice in their field. The Standards Committee of Practicing Classroom Teachers and other relevant experts such as researchers, teacher educators, subject matter specialists guide that work. Although teachers are a majority of the committees, in addition, the assessments are also updated every 10 years to measure the content of the updated standards. These assessments are not typical paper and pencil tests. Teaching by its very nature is a mixture of thought and action and is not measured well by traditional sit-down testing. Among the means of assessments are videotapes of individuals teaching and evaluation of his or her professional portfolio. Such a portfolio might include examples of students' work, sample lesson plans, and other items that teachers believe will support their candidacy. Candidates do, however, take examinations to assure depth of knowledge in their field. They are also asked to respond to and justify their response to classroom circumstances. The primary control of the MBPTS is in the hands of a 27-person board of directors. Although administrators, teacher educators, and the general public are represented on the NBPTS, 2/3 of the board members are teachers, a further step toward achieving professionalism in teaching. In recent years, MBPTS certification has meant a salary bonus for those teachers so designated. However, in 2009 and 2010, the amounts of these awards, which recently reached $20,000 as a one-time bonus, have been reduced. Victims of recession-driven budget cuts, the states remain committed to MBPTS certification, as is the Federal Department of Education. 8 of the 10 recipients of the Race to the Top federal education funding grants announced by the U.S. Department of Education referred programs administered by the NBPTS as in their proposals. The National Board received an Investing in Innovation grant from the U.S. Department of Education in November 2012 to integrate the videos of National Board certification teachers and teacher education programs for use with prospective teachers. Board certification also means that school boards have a recognizable basis on which to award merit pay or pay for performance other than arbitrary and impressionistic criteria, such as her children do well on tests or he seems to work long hours and is popular with the brightest students. Besides raising salaries, board certification offers a number of other advantages for teachers. Teachers who have achieved MBPTS certification are professionally more portable, meaning that they can move more freely across state lines. Also, this effort should stimulate research on what constitutes superior teaching. Likewise, it should trigger more attention to the research-based knowledge within teacher education and throughout the teaching force. Most of all, it should contribute to the essential but difficult mission of creating a system of recognition for highly skilled and dedicated professionals. The NBPTS is not without critics. Some educators claim that there is no solid knowledge base in teaching on which to ground the board's assessments. Others see the MBPTS as a public relations move to enhance the status and salaries of teachers and artificial tape trappings. Still, others suspicious that the MBPTS, controlled by its majority of teacher members, see it becoming a vehicle by which to serve the economic interests of teachers and to insulate them further from their clients. Finally, some critics dismiss the MBPTS as just another organization promoting a failed progressive ideology, rather than focusing on content knowledge and whether students are actually learning. For 2 decades, critics of board certification for teachers were uncertain that the process was sound and that it really made a difference, particularly in the classroom where the educational rubber meets the road. Finally, in 2008, the National Research Council completed a congressionally mandated study and confirmed that national board certification has a prospective impact on student achievement, teacher retention, and professional development. In particular, the research showed that board-certified teachers brought more about higher-level thinking or more of the deep thinking noted by a competitive 21st century workforce. In the same year that the NBPTS began its work, the Council of Chief State School Officers began parallel work that focuses on what prospective teachers ought to know and be able to do to retain initial teaching licenses in their states, called the Interstate New Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium. The effort sought to lay out standards for a common core of teaching skills and knowledge for all beginning teachers at all grade levels and subject areas. Recently, the CCSSO has shifted its focus from standards for beginning teachers to all teachers, new and old. In the process, the name was changed, dropping the new, now to be called the Interstate Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium. Together with the MBPTS, it is working to create model standards for board-compatible teacher licensing. Although their focuses are different, they are, however, complementary. The in-task standards are seen as core standards that apply across grade levels and subject matters for all teachers, whereas the MBPTS has developed standards that apply across the grade level range and are subject specified. Although all this talk of MBPTS, CCSSO, and in-task may seem like so much alphabet soup, the educators behind these letters are working hard to develop clear and practical standards. The purpose behind these standards is not only to have Teachers across the country possess a common core of professional abilities, but also to lay the foundation for a seamless transition to acquiring the board certification later on. The in-task standards are, in effect, the first tier of skills and knowledge that all new teachers should possess. Currently, 34 states have developed implemented teacher licensing standards that are based on 10 core principles developed by INTASC. These 10 INTASC standards are based on 10 core principles developed by INTASC. These 10 INTASC standards for all beginning teachers are listed on the inside covers of your book. Find more information on INTASC and the standards at the website that accompanies this book. Like other occupational groups, such as doctors and Teamsters, teachers have associations whose function is to protect their interests and attempt to improve their lot in life. For example, teacher salaries and other educational expenses come out of taxpayers' pockets. Tax revenues are used for many purposes, and intense competition occurs among groups that rely on tax money. To support their efforts to fight crime and delinquency, increase aid to the elderly and the poor, and so on. In the rough and tumble world of a democracy, teachers need someone or something to look out for their interests and the interests of the recipients of their services, children. This is the avowed function of many teachers' associations. Protections of teachers' rights and improvement in their rewards and working conditions will not just happen. There is an old saying, nobody gives you nothing for nothing. The advances teachers will occur largely as a result of their hard work and their willingness to stand up for what they believe. Our primary focus is this section is on the large umbrella organizations of teachers, the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers. These two groups have the most immediate and sustaining effects on the lives of teachers, although private sector unionism fervor has waned in recent decades. The NEA and the AFT have emerged as major forces in U.S. education and in the labor movement itself. In 2013, NEA members numbered 3.3 million. In the same year, the AFT reported a membership of 1.5 million. Both associations claim to represent teachers to the federal, state, and local governments, to educational authorities at the state and local levels, and finally to the general public. Both organizations are also come to the aid of teachers, like those in the vignettes on page 454 and 455, whose legal rights are being violated and who are being treated shoddily and unethically. On the other hand, many educators and members of the public have recently become critical of the policies and political stances of the two organizations. One administrator of an urban charter school recently complained they have more than $1 billion a year of combined budget. Goodness knows how much of that is channeled into buying influence. It is important to know something about the NEA and the AFT, because if you become a teacher, they will claim to be speaking for you. In fact, many new teachers report being asked to join a professional association their first day on the job. As you read the following pages, be aware that the NEA and the AFT are and have been immersed in a struggle for the hearts, minds, and membership dues of teachers for decades. Further, each is concerned with advancing its cause and gaining the support of future teachers. In addition, there is a short feature about one of the newer, smaller professional associations, the Association of American Educators, which is taking a very different approach than the major professional organizations of teachers. Founded in 1857, the NEA today is a complex institution that operates on the national, state, and local school district levels and serves a diverse clientele of rural, suburban, and urban teachers. The bulk of its 3.3 million or more members are classroom teachers. However, that figure includes teacher aides, administrators, professors, retired educators, and college students preparing to become teachers. The NEA has some 14,000 local affiliate chapters in approximately 80% of the nation's school districts. The NEA offers its members a wide range of services, from an extensive array of publications to research on its issues such as comparative salary scales and the attitudes of teachers on various topics. In addition, its UniServe program has some 1,800 professionals in the field working with teachers ready to give local teachers help in such specialized areas as collective bargaining. A number of specialized services are available to members, as well as travel programs, insurance policies, mutual fund programs, and book club programs. Since the NEA's inception, its goal has been to elevate the character and advance the interests of the profession of teaching, and to promote the cause of education in the United States. In advancing this goal, it has come out against issues such as competency testing of teachers, Despite this stance, since 1987, the NEA has supported the NBPTS, and it's long been a champion of small class sizes and special programs for linguistic and ethnic groups within schools. Further, it has taken forceful positions on other issues. It has, for example, been a vigorous opponent of various voucher plans that call for using public tax monies for religious and other private schools. Also, the organization has given only lukewarm and qualified support for charter schools. When it was started a century and a half ago, the NEA tried to speak for all public educators, including both teachers and administrators alike. That all changed about 50 years ago when two things happened. First, the work of the organization became more concentrated on improving the lot of public school teachers, and second, it started to flex its muscles at the political arena. In 1976, the NEA, for the first time, formally backed a presidential candidate. Since then, it has consistently backed mostly Democratic candidates for national and most state offices with active support and dollars. The NEA has become a strong political player for various reasons. At the time, one political commentator referred to teachers as bright, articulate, and reasonably well-informed, making them mutuals for political activism. What was true then is even truer now. Today, the NEA is big and rich. The NEA gets its money from mandatory dues. The average dues for local, state, and national memberships in 2013 was approximately $600, but got to be as high as $1,200 in one state. Its sheer size, money, and presence and many congressional districts are huge assets to any candidate or party it would care to support, and in turn the recipient politicians have been supportive of the organization's agenda. Based on federally required filings, the Center for Responsive Politics has established that between 1990 and 2002, 80% of the NEA's substantial political contributions went to Democratic Party candidates, and 95% of contributions went to Democrats in 2012. However, the NEA's one-sided support of the Democratic Party has caused many to question the wisdom of putting all these human and financial eggs into one political basket. In addition, many members are at odds with the NEA's support of various social and political causes, such as Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition and Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation and now defunct Acorn, plus the organization's continued support for pro-abortion groups. This is particularly so since the nation's teachers individually tend politically to split evenly. The NEA's own 2005 survey found that members are slightly more conservative than liberal in political philosophy. The AFT's membership is approximately one-third the size of the NEA's, but this organization represents teachers in key urban areas across the country. Currently, it bargains for teachers in New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, St. Louis, Detroit, Boston, Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. The AFT's leadership is very clear about placing the organization squarely within the American labor movement. The organization itself is affiliated with the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, which has a membership of more than 14 million. The AFT alone has more than 1.5 million members, with 43 states affiliates and 3,000 local affiliates nationwide. Much of the AFT's growth in the past 5 decades has resulted from its success in introducing the collective bargaining process into its annual salary negotiations with teachers. Its aggressive techniques, which include strikes and the threat of strikes, are credited with achieving substantial salary increases for teachers, and with forcing the NEA to adopt more militant tactics. On the downside, the shrinking student enrollments in some major cities, which are the AFT's real power base, have preoccupied the organization and sapped its energies. In 2012, it was reported that nationally this shrinkage has cost the AFT 40,000 members. Although the AFT is noted for its hard bargaining on bread and butter issues such as salaries, benefits, and it has also been a defender of academic freedom and greater participation in decision-making by teachers. In spite of the fact that the AFT opposes many of the same issues as the NEA, such as vouchers, and shares with it only qualified support for charter schools, the AFT has more progressive reputation, owing largely to the efforts of its longtime leader, Albert Schenker, who died in 1997. Once seen by many as the champion of raw teacher power, as concerned only with the good of teachers, Schenker became a strong advocate of education reform in his later years. He lobbied both his own organization and the public in support of many reform efforts, such as the MBPTS, certain kinds of merit pay, higher minimum standards for teachers, and longer and more intense teacher education. In contrast, the NEA has only recently come to support many of these reform efforts. For more than 30 years, the leaders of both the NEA and the AFT have been discussing the possibility of merging the two groups into one organization that would represent the entire teaching force. Although there have been many conversations over the years, the two organizations appear to want to remain separate and independent, but come together to lobby for common cause. Established in 1994, the Association of American Educators represents a fresh approach for teachers who are dissatisfied with the two major labor unions. Since its inception, AAE has become the largest national non-union teacher association in the United States. As such, it offers educators an alternative to the nation's teacher unions. Currently, the AAE helps to lead a coalition of over 350,000 teachers in all 50 states. Teachers whom it claims are focused on professionalism and putting the needs of our children first, although not a Tunian. AAE is opposed to many of the stands taken by the NEA and the AFT, such as teacher strikes, forced unionism, and opposition to education reforms like performance pay, school vouchers, weakening of teacher tenure, and many accountability reforms. AAE has the following key goals: to encourage and support teachers to embrace certain views on education in the United States, such as the view that schools should aim to improve a young person's character as well as her intellect; to keep the governance of the organization in the hands of practicing teachers. Currently, more than half the AAE's board of directors comprises classroom teachers who have won National Teacher of the Year awards; to keep the focus on educational issues and to stay out of partisan politics, in contrast to the $500 to $1,200 combined annual local dues charged by the labor unions. AAE dues are a mere $180, and much of that goes for liability insurance. This lean organization does not collectively bargain or engage in partisan political activity. It does, however, offer an alternative for those who are tired of paying hefty dues and who disagree particularly with the political stance and social views of the larger organizations. In addition to the NEA and the AFT, many other educational organizations exist. Each supports certain students and serves their special interests. Table 15.1 offers a sample of these groups. The ones listed under the heading Specialized Association of Teachers are primarily for teachers of particular subject matter or area within the life of the school. Under the second heading, nationwide special interest groups in education are more board-based organizations that typically include members of the public, administrators, people from higher education, and teachers. The third heading, nationwide groups supporting teacher education, identifies an organization involved in teacher education through journals, in-service training, or professional development institutes, as well as conference and conventions. Such organizations play a virtual role in keeping teachers informed about research and developments in their fields. It is here where much of the teacher's professional activity goes on. We urge you to consider joining those associations closest to your interests. There are also professional associations dedicated specifically to future teachers. The largest of these is the NEA student program, which consists of over 60,000 members across more than 1,000 college university campus chapters and 50 state programs. As a branch of the NEA, the SNEA offers many of the benefits of the NEA membership, such as liability insurance. Members student teach across the access to the NEA's research files and subscriptions to its regular publications, the NEA Handbook, and Today's Education. 3 other professional groups that are open to prospective teachers include the honor societies of Phi Lambda Delta, Phi Delta Kappa, and Delta Kappa Pi. These associations are international in scope but typically organize around chapters on university or college campuses. They hold regular meetings to discuss recent developments in the field, such as constructivist approaches to learning, brain research, and character education. These organizations provide an excellent opportunity for students to meet other education students in a non-classroom setting, and particularly to meet practicing teachers and administrators in a professional yet informal setting. If membership is such honorary associations interest you, we suggest that you check out their website, speak to one of your educational professors about which, if any, of the organizations on the campus and how you can learn about them, and call, write, or email the headquarters of these organizations to obtain general information and to learn whether they are chapters on your campus. It is not unheard of for beginning education students to initiate new chapters on their campuses. The area of aggressive trade unionism in the U.S. private sector of the economy has receded in recent years. In its place, a new cooperative spirit has brought about a revival of many of our industries. By putting slogans such as excellence and reengineering into practice, workers in management have altered the economic landscape. Many see a similar pattern being followed by members of public school teachers, public sector unions. Serious prolonged teacher strikes are becoming a rarity. Also, we have witnessed the beginnings of a revival similar to that seen in U.S. industry in the guise of the educational excellence movement and the reconstruction efforts currently sweeping through our schools. In our view, the issue of teacher professionalism is very much wrapped up in these broader school renewal efforts. Whether teachers are treated as professionals will depend on the bottom line. The performance of our schools. To promote that performance, teachers must begin both individually and collectively with a personal commitment to excellence. If professionalism is to mean anything, first and foremost, it means looking out for the concerns of one's clients, and who is in this case our children. Think back over your education and the teachers you have had. Were any of them sincere souls or but deadly dull? People of goodwill whose classes were unfortunately more like teachers who seem to have a magic touch enabling them to stretch an hour into the week. If you haven't had one of these mind-numbing teachers, consider yourself among the fortunate. Once upon a time, these teachers are most likely were filled with energy, ideas, and idealism, but something happened or something didn't happen. They probably survived their first years of teaching and then quietly settled into routines. Then, with the passage of time, those routines became mindless. Now, when they enter the classroom, these teachers unknowingly switch over to autopilot. These autopilot teachers undoubtedly went to all of the in-service days, did graduate work after school or during the summers, and probably hold advanced degrees, but something didn't happen because they failed to take personal control of their professional development. Professional development is a large term encompassing the efforts both by a school and by individual teachers primarily to improve their skills and competencies as a teacher. In this final chapter, we focus on the professional development efforts of new teachers. Teaching, and particularly sage on the stage teaching, can be draining both intellectually and emotionally without recharging one's batteries through professional development and learning new theories, methods, and skills. Many of the embedded joys and satisfactions of teaching go flat over time. In the 1990s, the U.S. Army had a motto, "Be all you can be, join the Army." The essence of the professional development activities described here is that they offer ways and means for you as a teacher to be all you can be. As we have stressed throughout this textbook, schooling in the United States is changing. Where once schools could be satisfied with teaching basic skills and conveying preset bodies of information, today the shifting societal and economic landscapes are demanding change. We are increasingly becoming a knowledge society in which the demands on our students who face the challenge of surviving and thriving in a global economy increase yearly. The dramatic example can be seen in the rising interest in technological literacy. As American society has become increasingly dependent on electronic information services, the needs and advantages of being comfortable and competent with computers, the internet, networking, and the latest technologies have become more evident. Of course, the demands on today's students go much further than that. The field of education has a great deal to learn in this regard from U.S. industry. For 2 decades, successful businesses and corporations have made a major commitment to reengineering and reinventing themselves. A good example of this continual growth and development is Apple, the organization developed by the late Steve Jobs, which has introduced a stream of novel electronic products from the Mac to the iPad and the iPhone to the iPad. Creatively oriented firms such as Apple make a major investment in their employees. Those individuals in turn know they must grow as employees. Similarly, our schools must become learning organizations, where the goals and priorities are driven by questions such as what does the student need to get past his or her individual learning barrier, and how can I find the right material or right question to ignite the student's mind. At the same time, classical educational questions such as what is most worth knowing and are students really understanding this material must be continually revisited and argumented by a new priority for student learning. This shift in the ground beneath our feet has profound implications for teachers. Rather than a skills trainer or an information dispenser, a new teacher must be a learning professional. In today's world, that means becoming a continuous learner, committed to one's growth both as a person and as a professional. It means knowing the most current information in one's field and knowing how to share it with students. It means being part of a community of learning with other teachers, both giving and taking knowledge. Not many decades ago, it was considered adequate for a teacher to obtain an undergraduate education and a teaching license and then have no further training. Today, most states have legislative continuing education for teachers. In fact, in more than half of the states, it is no longer possible to gain permanent license. An increasing number of states are requiring teachers to keep up with developments in their fields or specific areas of education. Although we have known a few that of what might be called born teachers or naturals, the overwhelming majority of teachers have to learn our craft. In addition, because of this craft is continually evolving, we need to be continuous learners. The broad operational vehicle for becoming a continuous learner is professional development. This term refers to a whole range of activities available to help teachers stay alive professionally. One of the great stumbling blocks to professional development is time. When does a teacher have the time? A recent study by the National Staff Development Council found that teachers in the United States are given significantly less time and support for high-quality professional learning than their counterparts in other developed nations. The study compared the U.S. teachers' average of 1,080 hours per year in classroom teaching time with that of teachers from European and Asian countries, where primary school teachers teach 803 hours per year and secondary teachers only teach 664 hours per year. The report states a significant number of schools in high-achieving countries schedule time into teachers' workday or week for professional development, predominantly including forms of collaborative work on instructional issues. As this report strongly suggests, more time for professional development should become a major educational priority. Teachers have two broad categories of professional development available to them: programs offered by institutions and self-initiated activities. Most schools in their districts sponsor professional development in the form of in-service programs such as courses, workshops, and short retreats. These professional development programs often focus on some particular problem or issue, such as communication with parents, or target some new area such as environmental education. Or, for instance, conversation between parent and teacher might for instance, if students in a particular school are getting unsatisfactory grades on standardized mathematics achievement tests, the district may choose to provide special training for the faculty, or the district may decide to switch to a new, supposedly better mathematics program, a change that will also require special training for the faculty. A recent study found that 2 of the 3 teachers reported that they had structured opportunities for collaboration with fellow teachers. However, this collaboration time amounted to only 2.7 hours each week. Teachers named 4 areas they believe are most essential for their continuing professional development: content or subject matter, classroom management, students with special needs, and technology. On the other hand, fewer than half reported their professional development focused on teaching students with disabilities and on English learners. This type of collaboration among teachers is an example of positive social capital. This term refers to the quality of the relationship within a group, and it is used to measure the value added to the collective work of a group. Recently, researchers at Stanford have applied this concept to schools, focusing on quality of the relationships and professional sharing among faculty members. An indicator of positive social capital would be where a teacher with a discipline problem, instead of consulting the principal or an expert, consults another teacher or asks for help in a teacher's meeting. The researchers found that this type of social capital in a school is positively related to student achievement. On the other hand, some schools abound with negative social capital, such as teachers hoarding materials from one another, socializing in cliques, and faculty meetings that are rare and unpleasant. Another form of professional development comes through supervision. During a teacher's early years in the profession, school districts provide professional advice that amounts to one-on-one help. For instance, if you are a new high school teacher, your department head may observe your classes regularly and discuss your observations with you. If you are an elementary school teacher, your building principal or lead teacher may take regular visits and follow them up with feedback sessions. Although supervision can sometimes be quite threatening, particularly to non-tenured teachers, it offers an opportunity to obtain valuable insight and information about your teaching techniques and skills. In recent years, many school districts have instituted mentoring programs whereby more experienced teachers are assigned to assist beginners. The same study cited previously found that 3 of the 4 new teachers were participating in special induction programs, and 4 out of 5 had been assigned mentors. Regrettably, these supports were available for a significantly lower percentage of teachers in high-poverty, high-minority schools. Along with special training, these mentors may receive a reduction in teaching responsibilities, a salary increase, or both. Mentoring programs formalize and make more systematic time-honored process in which experienced teachers take a rookie under their wing, helping the beginner make a theory into practice transition and serving as a non-judgmental colleague. Group study is another common form of continuous learning for teachers. It often takes the form of committee work. When a problem arises in the school for which there is no apparent solution, a group of people takes upon itself the task of exploring the problem with a view towards recommending an enlightened course of action. In recent years, to obtain opinions from outside the school, teachers and administrators have begun inviting community residents to these study groups. Typical issues these groups might address include curricular alternatives, dealing with bullying on the playground, an analysis of the unused education resources in the community, a program of writing across the curriculum, and the potential benefits and costs of using support professionals in a high school. A popular form of self-initiated professional development and a way for you to continue to learn is to take courses or to work toward an advanced degree. It is the rare area that does not have a college or university offering courses suitable for and interesting to teachers. Special and regular courses are offered in the evening, on weekends, and during summer vacation. Many universities are now offering computer-based distance learning courses which enable teachers to do advanced study without leaving their homes. These courses and degree programs not only allow teachers to gain a deeper understanding of their work, but also make it possible for some teachers to train for other jobs in education, such as guidance counseling, administration, or college teaching. One of the side benefits of going back to school for teachers is that they gain experience being on the other side of the desk. This, in turn, helps them empathize with students struggling to learn. One aim of education is to develop the ability to engage in independent study. Independent study is jargon for being able to go it alone. Although this approach is much discussed among teachers, students seem to get little actual practice in choosing and systematically investigating their own areas of interest. Nevertheless, self-initiated independent study is one of the most important means for continual self-renewal available to you as a teacher. Teachers are confronted daily with things they do not understand about children and knowledge about human learning. Is there anything in this discussion about learning styles and how I can apply it in my classroom? What does the new brain research suggest about teaching topic A and subject B? What are the fundamental skills of composition that children should know? How can I help my students use history for their own benefit? Such questions are daily grist for teachers' independent study mill. Answering them, that is, engaging in this kind of independent study, used to mean trasping off to a library and haunting the stacks for information. Today, online search engines such as Google and Bing bring a flood of information, theory, and advice with a few keyboard clicks. Even if you cannot find teachers in your own building who are interested in a particular question or issue, you don't have to go on this quest alone. The internet has come to the rescue. Google, for example, has established a Google Teacher Center, a portal to all sorts of useful resources and materials. One of these resources is Google for Educator discussion groups, where you can join a virtual group centered on a particular topic or to start your own group. Of course, your studies should not be confined to professional problems. Your own personal interests may lead you into such areas as organic gardening, physical fitness, classic movies, the politics of colonial America, the humanizing of the corporate state, and the harnessing of the media. Not by professional problems of teaching and learning alone doth the teacher live. As we said at the beginning of this book, all the approaches to professional development mentioned here, the most important is developing the habit of reflecting on one's practice. If teachers, whether new or old, are to improve, they need to make systematic reflection on what is happening in their classrooms. A regular part of their professional lives and the spaces of their lives. In the time between classes, driving home, working out at the gym, or cooking dinner, they need to ask themselves questions like, what went right in class today? What didn't work? Which student am I not reaching? And what should I do about it? What can I do to get my uninvolved student more engaged? Are there other ways of presenting this material that will connect with students who have different learning styles? The next time I teach this material, am I going to keep X and change Y? Becoming a reflective practitioner, that is, developing the habit of systematic reflection on your work, is the royal road to excellence in teaching. One of the most promising school improvement innovations in recent years has been the professional learning communities movement. Many names and labels in education don't speak directly to what they are about and can be confusing. Professional learning communities are the exception. The aim of PLCs is to form the teachers and administrators in a particular school into a group that is working together to grow and improve as professionals. Some have called PLCs communities of continuous inquiry and improvement, and see them as potent instruments for changing a school's climate and learning outcomes. In PLC schools, structured time is provided for teachers to observe one another's classroom and have time for giving one another feedback. Time, too, was available for teachers and administrators to study new instructional and curricular ideas and plan together how to implement them in their particular setting. Many of the forms of professional development outlined previously, such as mentoring, group study, and supervision, come together in a coordinated way in the promising method of helping teachers and administrators become truly continuous learners. Educational reform expert Michael Fulan suggested that teachers seeking to improve themselves are characterized by 4 attitudes. They accept that it is possible to improve, they are ready to be self-critical, they recognize better practice than their own, and most importantly, they are willing to learn what they have to learn to do what needs to be done. In our view, teachers who are not engaged in learning activities because of lack of opportunity or lack of professional incentive are stunting their own career and are barriers to the educational reform we need. In the Voices from the Classroom feature, one teacher describes the moment she first realized how deeply the commitment to lifeline learning can run among teachers. Before I began teaching, I had a certain vision of what the world of teachers would be like. I prepared myself for hearing a lot of, when you've been around as long as I have, and when you get to be my age, you'll understand. I felt a sort of pre-embarrassment for all the mistakes I would probably make before I got it. To me, the profession presented itself as kind of a hierarchy where the big cheese of the school would offer condescending advice and rolled eyes at my rookie mishaps. Now, only 6 months into the experience, I am happy to say that my fears were quite wrong. Not too long ago, I went to visit a colleague of mine, Jane, in her classroom during one of her planning periods. She'd been a teacher for about 6 or 7 years, and at our school for only 3. About a minute or two into our conversation, I noticed that the door that adjoined her room with Mrs. Connor's room was opened, and students were moving between the two. Soon Miss Connor herself came bustling in and out of Jane's room, looking for glue sticks and getting a clarification about some graphic organizer. After asking what was going on, I made a concerted effort to hide my surprise. Jane was asked to take on a smaller class load this year and to spend the remaining time as a literacy coach. She told me that the job included sitting in on classes for a week or so and then working one-on-one with that particular teacher to experiment with different instructional practices and techniques. But Mrs. Connor, she had been teaching for 30 years. This was a woman who had a way with students, parents, and other teachers that I wish I could bottle and sell. It was one thing to smile and nod at staff meetings when younger teachers spoke, but to invite a teacher with far fewer years on the job into your classroom was a quite different scenario. I could only describe the feeling as humbling. Nobody, it seemed, was out to get me or laugh at my naiveness. The more I began to look around, the more I noticed that many of my colleagues were age blind. The task at hand was to educate students, and if someone had a better way of doing things, or if some workshop came along that could benefit a teacher's practice, then many of those educators were up for another learning experience. I had always heard that teachers were learners for life, but I wasn't sure how many of them brought that old cliche. As it turns out, seeking more of our students in our own practice is not considered a sign of weakness or a stigma by all those scary veterans. It is simply part of being a professional. When you are considering taking a teaching position, you should investigate the school district's policies about professional development. In particular, you should find answers to the following questions. Are the schools conceived of as learning communities in which everyone, adults and children alike, are always learning? Does the school to which you are being assigned have an atmosphere of relational trust and positive social capital? Do teachers, specialists, and administrators see their continuing educational growth as an integral part of their workday? Does the district's definition of professional development take into account whatever contributes to making an educator more effective? What professional development costs are to be borne by you or by the school district or the state? Although the school district that employs you will have a substantial impact on your growth and development as a teacher, ultimately the task of professional development is yours. In order not to become the dull, burnout teacher we described at the beginning of this section, you have to act as much as possible. You have to be in control of your own professional development. Doing so will not only make you a better teacher, but it will also bring you happiness. A study on teacher happiness that we discussed in Chapter 1, Why Teach, recently asked over 1,000 teachers what contributes to teacher happiness. These top 2 factors were selected: making a difference in student lives and watching students learn. 91% of the teachers selected these factors, which are both the benefits and end products of good teaching, along with other factors such as learning with students, bringing their own interests into teaching, and collaborating with other teachers. They point to outcomes that define professional success and individual happiness. End of chapter 15.